Ladies and gentlemen, Capital G here, and we're going to be ranking all of the sagas today. All of these sagas that have been printed thus far from Dominaria up until Kaldheim. 44 of them in all. Yes, I fell into the tier list trap. Figured it'd be fun to try something a little different before I go back to some deck techs, so why not? So we're going to dive in. I'm going to rank them based on excellent, which means pretty much any deck in those colors can run it. Playable, situational, which means very specific decks or setups can run this, and no good is just that. Just don't even bother. So starting off with Arnie Slays the Troll. This is good spot removal. You use this to have one of your creatures fight another creature and take it off the board. I'm going to call it playable, although, again, you have to make sure you have a good creature on the board in order to take full advantage of that first chapter. Chapter 2 does pay back the red portion of the mana cost and also gives you some +1/+1 counters, so that's pretty cool. And Chapter 3, Gain Life. You're not really going to worry about that. It's just a sorcery speed fight spell. That's the way I like to look at this. Ascends of the Worthy. Now this is actually pretty combo-tastic. The first couple of chapters let you choose a creature you control, and all damage that we dealt to creatures you control is dealt to that creature instead. So, for example, you cast Ascent of the Worthy, follow up with a Blasphemous Act. Well, only one of your creatures is going to eat that damage. Even funny if that creature just happens to be a stuffy doll. So this is very much a sort of game plan, like build around it. Or you can use it defensively if you have another red player that wants to, wipe the board with their effects. So I'm going to throw this one in the situational. This calls for something very specific. Yes, Chapter 3 lets you return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. But reanimation, if you want to reanimate something, you generally want to do it sooner rather than later. Battle for Bredagard. Or Bredagard, sorry. Some of these names are a little tricky. But chapters 1 and 2 give you a 1/1 white warrior. The first one is a white human, and the second one is a green elf. And then chapter 3 says choose any number of artifact tokens or creature tokens with different names and copy them. So you're playing some sort of token shenanigans that you want to copy. I don't know. I don't think it's that good, honestly. I mean, if you manage to make it to Chapter 3 and you have, say, a beast token and an elf token and a human token and a soldier token and a treasure token and a gold token. Actually, maybe situational. Let's go with situational. If you're running an all the tokens kind of deck, it could be pretty good for you. Battle of Frost and Fire. 5 mana gives you a light board wipe, 4 damage to each non-giant creature and each planeswalker on chapter 1. So you cast it, it hits the battlefield, and you get to deal that damage. I think that is absolutely excellent. The Scry 3 on chapter 2 still pretty cool. You can dig up a good card to follow up with. And chapter 3 says whenever you cast a converted mana. A spell with converted mana cost 5 or greater, draw 2 cards and discard a card. So you get a little bit of card advantage at the end, but really it's for that chapter 1, being able to immediately wipe out a lot of smaller creatures and tokens. Binding the Old Gods. Destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls for 4 mana. Generally, 4 mana at sorcery speed is kind of slow for this effect, even if you can target pretty much whatever you want. Any creature, any artifact, any planeswalker. The fact that this follows itself up by ramping you with another forest card. It does not have to be basic forest, mind you, any forest. And finishing up with having creatures you control gain Death Touch. Chapter 1 followed by Chapter 2 is what makes this, in my opinion, an excellent saga. Trainer's Torment. First couple of chapters let you deal 2 damage to each of your opponents and you gain 2 life. Chapter 3 lets you create an XX Nightmare Horror where X is half your life total. That horror would then deal X damage to you. If you have a way of mitigating that damage, you have yourself a very, very big creature token that you can, copy or do whatever you want with. But it takes a couple turns to set that up. I think it's a little slow to get there. Elspeth Conquers Def. For 5 mana, you can exile a permanent an opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater. That's a very high price for a single target exile. The following turn, your opponents get taxed. Their non-creature spells are taxed 2 additional mana. And Chapter 3 is return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The reanimation is too slow. The exile cost for a single target is too high. Doesn't even get, say, Zulaport Cutthroat, for example. So really, unfortunately, the mana cost makes it not good. Elspeth's Nightmare, on the other hand, 3 mana, destroy a creature an opponent controls with power 2 or less. That gets Zulaport Cutthroat, or you can get a Llanowar Elf, or any sort of small sneaky utility creature. Knock them out. And heck, if there's someone running Doran in your meta, well, it takes out Doran. Chapter 2, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land, and that player discards it. And then Chapter 3 is exile an opponent's graveyard. So all 3 things are useful. This one's a bit more meta dependent, so I'm going to go situational. But if there are a lot of smaller creatures running around in your meta, then this might go up to playable. Fall of the Imposter. You put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature each of the first 2 chapters. Chapter 3 says, exile a creature with the greatest power amongst creatures target opponent controls. I guess what's nice about this is it doesn't target the creature itself, just the opponent. Nonetheless, unless you can proliferate into that 3rd chapter quickly, a little slow for that removal effect. And a single +1/+1 counter over each of 2 turns. No, not really. I'm not feeling that one. Fall of the Thran. Destroy all lands. Very, very high risk, high reward here. Destroying all lands. And then the remaining chapters allow each player to return land cards from their graveyard to the battlefield. You do not want to get bogged. The rewards are like... The ceiling on this is like way up here and the floor is way down here. So I'm going to go with situational. Because if your opponents have a bog or you're not able to bog your opponents, then this can backfire very hard. But if you play your cards right, it's an amazing card. So I'm going to go with situational. Fierce's Retribution. 4 mana gets you basically a Serra Angel that's white and it's white, so yeah, it gets you a Serra Angel for Chapter 1. Immediate board presence. Chapter 2 says angels you control can tap to destroy a creature with less power. And Chapter 3 is angels you control gain double strike. So very much a tribal card, but a good tribal card. It gives you an efficiently costed creature. And it also gives you the ability to eventually tap and destroy opponent's creatures. Of course, you are still vulnerable to a board wipe yourself prior to this happening, the 2nd chapter, but I think it is worth putting the pressure on. Forging the Tyrite Sword. This is Boros, 3 mana in Boros, and the first 2 chapters each let you create a treasure token. So basically, you cast this on, say, turn 2. Now, let's say on turn 3. Let's say you go land drop, land drop, land drop. Turn 3, Forging the Tyrite Sword. You get your treasure token right away. So that's 4 mana. Next turn, after you draw step, you get your 2nd treasure token. That's 5. Make your land drop 6. It's a one-time acceleration, but a pretty sweet acceleration. That 3rd chapter, of course, letting you go get either Halvar, which is one of the more recent Kaldheim guards, or an equipment card, and put into your hand. So ramps you up in mana, gives you some card advantage. Better early than late, but still, I think this is an excellent, excellent card if you're running Boros and you're running even just like a skull clamp, or of course Boros colors, you'd likely be running a Sunforger. Herald unites the elves. This is great for the Golgari Elves deck, which has gotten a lot of support over the years. Not just this set, but if you go back to Shadowmoor, for example, elves in this color combination got a lot of support there as well. And if you're running black-green elves, you are running Herald Unites the Elves. You don't need Tyvar to run Tyvar, although if you're running black-green elves, you probably want Tyvar in your deck. But you don't need to run them to get the full benefit, being able to, mill 3 cards and then resurrect any elf in your graveyard. Chapter 2, of course, put a 1/1 counter on each elf you control, so add a little bit of an anthem effect. And Chapter 3, whenever an elf you control attacks, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1. So this can do a lot. Obviously, for full effect, you want to keep your elves alive as long as possible. We do have cards like Heroic Intervention to help with that. I'm going to go with playable just because, Chapter 1 is amazing. The remaining chapters are dependent on whether or not you can hold your board. The History of Analya. For 3 mana, get a couple of knights on the first 2 chapters. And Chapter 3 says knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. Even in the Knight Tribal deck, I don't know. It was great in Standard, but for Commander, I'm not feeling it. Invasion of the Giants, 2 mana. Chapter 1 says scry 2. Chapter 2 says draw a card, then you may reveal a giant card from your hand. And when you do, deal 2 damage to an opponent or planeswalker. And Chapter 3 says the next giant spell you cast is 2 less. So it's a down payment on a giant spell 2 turns from now. And it gives you a scry 2 right away and a card draw. Not good enough. I'm not feeling it. I don't think it's good enough. It's not like a terrible card. But it's really specifically for the is a Giants deck, or you could probably do some more fun changeling shenanigans with it too. But still, no, I don't think I don't think these card effects are good enough. Carter's Vicious Return. For 4 mana, you can sacrifice a creature to deal 2 damage to a target. Then each player discards a card. Then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a 1/1 counter and haste. I mean, it's 4 mana to sacrifice something, so I don't know. I'm feeling not so great on this one. Chapter 2 is amazing. Forcing each player to discard a card, yourself included, of course. I think Chapter 2 is amazing. I think this card is a shoe-in if you're running Chainer, but other than that, I don't see. I can't imagine a place this goes. Obviously, and if I'm wrong about any of these cards, if you know what you can do with these cards, put them in the comments. Let's have that discussion. By the way, King Narfi's Betrayal. For 3 mana, it says each player mills 4 cards, and then you may exile a creature or planeswalker from each graveyard. Then chapters 2 and 3 says until end of turn you can cast spells from among the cards from among the exiled cards, and spend manas over any color. I think this is excellent. This is sort of like 3 mana for a delayed draw 4. But even if something happens to the saga itself, you're exiling each of your opponent's best creature or planeswalker cards. I think that's quite good. Kiora Best the Sea God. 7 mana for this particular saga, one of the more expensive ones, but you immediately get an 8/8 Kraken with hexproof. Then Chapter 2 says tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls. They don't untap. So you can freeze lock all of your opponents, one of your opponent's non-land permanents. And then Chapter 3 says gain control of a permanent an opponent controls and untap it. I like the card. I'm going to throw it to playable. The only thing holding it back is that 7 mana, depending on your play group, might already be win the game territory, and I don't think koryakira wins the game here. But if your play group or your meta is a little bit slower and you have a bit more room to breathe, I think it's a fun card. I quite like it. Medomai's Prophecy. Read those effects. Scry 2, choose a card name. If you cast a spell of the chosen name, draw 2 cards. And look at the top card of each player's library. Do any of those sound impressive for any amount of mana? I didn't think so. I might consider Medomai's Prophecy for the Persistent Petitioners deck or anything of its ilk. Other than that, don't bother. Nico defies Destiny. I see foretell, and foretell in each of the 3 chapters on this card. So if you are running the foretell deck, go for it. It doesn't look like foretell is an evergreen mechanic by any means. It looks like we've got some in Kaldheim, and we'll probably see it again soon-ish. But I don't know if that's next year or 2 years or even 3 years from now, really. So unless we see this mechanic again in another set, really this only has one place to go. So we're going to dump that over here. For erection scriptures, on the other hand, it's basically delayed damnation, if you will, but you can actually protect one of your creatures or many of your creatures if you have artifact creatures. So let's go ahead and go to excellent on this one because I think it's a great card. Of course, chapter 1 is put a 1/1 counter on one of your creatures, it becomes an artifact, and then chapter 2 is destroy all not artifact creatures. So you're not worried about somebody else wiping your board because that's what you're doing. You're wiping everybody else's board. If they have artifact creatures, yeah, they get to keep them. But most people don't have a lot of artifact creatures, so we'll be taking more advantage of this than most opponents. Chapter 3, being able to exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. Excellent effect. Dead cards stay dead. Rite of Belzenlock. You get 2 0/1 black cleric creature tokens on each of your first 2 chapters. The third one says you get a 6/6 demon with flying trample, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice another creature. If you can't, this creature deals 6 damage to you. So it's basically a delayed 6/6 flying demon. You may want that, you may not, I don't know. But having the 0/1s on those first couple of turns, especially if you're running a deck of Skull Clamp, I think it's quite playable. Showdown of the Sculpts. Let's go ahead and throw that into excellent. We're not even gonna cause any drama about this one. It's essentially impulse draw 4 cards in Boros for 4 mana. That's a pretty good rate. So chapter 1 is you exile the top 4 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn you may play those cards. So it doesn't matter if you get this early or late in the game, it's card advantage immediately for you, so why not? Chapters 2 and 3 says whenever you cast a spell, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, so a nice little bonus. Even if you don't have the creatures, it doesn't matter. Really, you're playing this card for chapter 1. Song of Freyalise lets you, if you're going wide with tokens, you can do some serious ramping with this. Chapters 1 and 2 let you tap your creatures for any color of mana. Chapter 3 says put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Give them vigilance, trample, and indestructible until end of turn. Chapter 3 is nice if nobody really deals with your board, but chapters 1 and 2 are where it's at. You're going wide with tokens, and then all of a sudden, boop, Song of Freyalise, and all of a sudden your 10 creatures become mana rocks. And hey, going from 6-7 mana to 17 all of a sudden, this card can do that. Excellent. The Akronian War. Chapter 1 says gain control of target creature as long as this remains on the battlefield. Chapter 2 says, until your next turn, creatures your opponent's control attack each turn if able. And Chapter 3 says, each tapped creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. So kind of it's a strange little delayed board wipe where you have creatures damaging themselves. So you can set up something pretty nasty with this. Honestly, I would like this card better if there were reliable ways of removing counters from a saga, which currently there are not. There's Aether Snap, and there might be a couple other cards that randomly do it, but so far there's no reliable way of taking counters off of enchantments. Once that day comes, the Akronian War becomes an excellent card because, hey, all of a sudden you can just keep removing that first counter and repeating Chapter 1 over and over and over again, and just basically taking control of all the creatures on the board. Obviously, Chapter 2, you have to make sure no one can come at you because there's nothing to restrict that, but you are forcing your opponents to attack. And of course, Chapter 3 says each tapped creature deals damage to itself, so it does eventually wipe the board. I'm going to throw that one into situational for now, but if there's ever in the future any ways to consistently remove counters from this, it goes to a playable card. The Antiquities War. I'm just going to throw that into no good, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it looks good on the surface. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Reveal an artifact from among them, put them into your hand. I've never hit this twice. It's both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 has this effect, but I've never gotten 2 cards off of this. I've gotten 1 maybe, but I've never gotten 2, regardless of how many artifacts are in my deck. Chapter 3, turning all of my artifacts into a 5/5. Seems like a great finisher on paper, but when you're forecasting it this hard, it's not as effective as we'd like. The Bears of the Jarrah. 3 mana gets you a 2/2 shapeshifter with changeling. Cool. Chapter 2 says any number of target shapeshifter creatures you control have base power toughness 4/4. That's a permanent effect, by the way. All your just whatever shapeshifters you have on the table when this chapter triggers is a 4/4, and it just stays that way until they're sent to another zone. Chapter 3 says choose up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Each creature of power 4 or greater you control deals damage to equal to its power to that permanent. So this could eventually remove other creatures, planeswalkers. Well, 1 creature or planeswalker, so you could knock out some creatures or planeswalkers with the Chapter 3 eventually. But waiting 2 turns for that removal effect. And we are relying on, say, the board not getting wiped. Now, we are in blue, so it is a bit easier to defend our board, which is why I'm going to throw this one into situational, because this calls for something very specific in order to make work well. Binding of the Titans. Chapter 1 says each player mills 3 cards. Chapter 2 says exile up to 2 cards from graveyards. It can be any 2 cards from any graveyards, by the way. And Chapter 3 says return a creature or land from your graveyard to your hand. A little risky because a lot of decks like to play with their graveyards. And giving each of your opponents 3 cards, that's basically everybody draws 3. So you draw 3, your opponents essentially draw 9, depending on what you're playing against. So I'm going to throw this into situational. Obviously, you want to be careful whose graveyards you're filling. Everything involving just like your graveyard is amazing. It just really depends on what you're doing to your opponent's graveyards, because that time that they have between Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is crucial. The Birth of Metatests. Believe it or not, as long as you're running basic planes, it's an excellent card. It says for 2 mana, you basically get your next land drops, which for basic planes, put in your hand. So you're guaranteed your next land drop. Sweet. Chapter 2 gives you a blocker. Sure. Chapter 3 says you gain 2 life. Not super relevant, that 3rd chapter, but Chapter 1, it's basically 2 mana, draw card in white. That's amazing. For white. As white gets better card draw, maybe this drops down to a playable or even a situational card. But if you're running mono white, there's no reason not to run this because it gives you card advantage. The Blood Sky Massacre. We get a 2/3 demon berserker creature token with menace. Okay. And whenever berserker attacks, you draw a card, lose 1 life. That's the second chapter. Third chapter says get a red for each berserker you control. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So if you're running the berserker deck, even if you're running the berserker deck, I don't know if you really want to run this. Because this is a kind of deck that would be vulnerable to a board wipe. And maybe you get to take advantage of chapter 2 if you're lucky. But once you drop this, if somebody's got the board wipe, they're going to use it to make sure you don't get to draw cards. That's my concern there, and that is why I'm throwing it to the no good pile. The Eldest Reborn. Nico B coming in. Chapter 1 says each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Chapter 2, each opponent discards a card. And Chapter 3, put a creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Playable. I want to go excellent, but that 5 CMC is a little high for the initial effect. Especially since we have a lot of cards that can cause our opponents to sacrifice creatures and even planeswalkers at 3 mana or even 2 mana. So 5 is expensive for that effect, but if you get to hit those other 2 chapters, that's where the value comes in. The first Eruption. You play this, deal 1 damage to each creature without flying. You might not clean up some small things, you might not, who knows. Chapter 2 is the reason you play the first Eruption. Add 2 red mana. So let's say you play this on 3. You untap, you have your 3 mana that you initially used to cast this. You have 2 more red mana because of Chapter 2, plus your land drop. So much like Forging the Tyrite Sword, this second chapter is pretty sweet. Chapter 3 says sacrifice a mountain, and if you do, deal 3 damage to each creature. You know what? You have that option to, trade a land for a board wipe. I don't think it's a great effect, but Chapter 2 is what brings this into a whole nother level. The first Akronian Games. For 3 mana, you get a 1/1 human soldier. And then somebody wipes the board, and then chapters 2 and 3 are completely irrelevant. Chapter 4, you get a gold token. You can sacrifice a gold token for a mana. Again, too vulnerable to the chaotic nature of whether or not you can keep a creature on the board. If you're able to keep your creature, then chapters 2 and 3, putting those extra 1/1 counters and drawing some cards on chapter 3, pretty sweet. But I think it's too. I'll go situational. If you're going to drop this, make sure you can defend your board. Because if you can hold your board, you get the full benefit of chapters 2 and 3. If not, you're waiting forever for that gold token. The Flame of Kell, Chapter 1, discard your hand. Not good. Like chapters 2, draw 2 cards is pretty sweet, but if something happens to the Flame of Kell, you don't get to draw those cards. Chapter 3 gives you damage bonus from any of your red sources. Pretty sweet, but the initial cost is 2 mana and discard your hand and then wait 2 turns to get the full benefit. Not in Commander. I've run sort of a casual 60 card with this, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun actually. But in Commander, it's the risk is not worth this reward. The Mending of Dominaria. Chapters 1 and 2 lets you put the top cards of your library into your graveyard. You may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And Chapter 3 says return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield and shuffle your library. I'm going to call it playable. 5 CMC is a little high, although it is in green, so 5 is a little less in green than it would be in other colors. And I think this is excellent, especially if you're running a lot of, say, fetches or a lot of lands that sacrifice themselves. Or if you manage to get this trigger on the stack and you just happen to have Zurin Orb. Sack all your lands, get a bunch of mana. Boom. But nonetheless, I think it's a playable card, but you have to, it calls for something kind of specific. The Mirari Conjecture. If you're running a blue Spellslinger deck of some sort, Chapter 1 lets you get one of your instants back. Chapter 2 lets you get one of your sorceries back. And Chapter 3 lets you copy instants and sorcery spells that you cast that turn. This is blue, so blue can in fact put themselves in a situation where they can take advantage of the timing on this. So why not? We'll throw it into playable. I don't think it's an excellent card at 5 mana. It's a little high, but the payoff on Chapter 3 is what justifies that mana cost. The Raven's Warning. For 3 mana, we get a 1/1 blue bird with flying, and you gain 2 life. Chapter 2 says, whenever one or more creatures you control with flying deal combat damage to a player this turn, look at that player's hand and draw a card. So if you manage to swing out at all your opponents, you get to draw 3 cards, if I'm reading that properly. Let me double check that. And whenever one or more creatures deal with flying deal combat damage to a player. I'd have to double check. I'm not sure if it triggers for each opponent or if it only triggers once and done. Chapter 3 is you may put a card you own from outside the game on top of your library. So Chapter 3, that box is empty. It's Chapter 1, Chapter 2. And no, I don't think, like 3 mana for a bird and then maybe a card depending on the board state. No, I don't think so. The 3 Seasons. Chapter 1 lets you mill 3 cards. Thumbs up. Chapter 2, return up to 2 snow permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this wants to run in a snow deck apparently, and Chapter 3 says choose 3 cards in each graveyard. Their owners shuffle those cards to their libraries. Now that effect on Chapter 3, I kind of wish that was Chapter 2, because then it would be worth running. But waiting 2 turns for this effect, for this ability to basically slow down those decks that reuse their graveyard, I don't think it's that great. It's 2 mana essentially for a delayed draw 2 if you're running enough snow permanents, or you have enough snow permanents in your graveyard. So I'm going to call that one situational. You're building a snow deck with this, but you got to make sure you have the ability to take advantage of Chapter 2 long before you cast this card. The Trickster God's Heist. Chapter 1 says you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. Chapter 2 says you may exchange control of 2 target non-basic, non-creature permanents that share a type. So artifact for artifact, or enchantment for enchantment. Hey, you can actually exchange the Trickster God's Heist itself for a smothering type, for example. That's a really cool deal, by the way. Chapter 3 says target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. You're playing this card for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and they are both amazing. Excellent card. The Triumph of Annex. This might be interesting in Voltron strategies, actually. So it says here, Chapters 1, 2, and 3, until end of turn, target creature gains trample and plus X plus O, where X is the number of lore counters on the Triumph of Annex. So you play it, you give one of your creatures 1/0 trample, next turn it gets 2/0 trample, following turn 3/0 trample. If you have a way of defending your Voltron commander, making sure it stays on the battlefield long enough to take advantage of each of these trample triggers, then you just might be taking down your opponents one at a time, commander damage style. I'm going to call it a playable. You have to definitely build around this. Chapter 4 says a creature you control fights a creature you don't control. Ideally, if you're running this, you want to end the game by Chapter 3. Time of Ice. I'm going to throw this into situational because there's some shenaniganry that you can pull with this. I don't think it's a great card, but the shenanigans are there. So Chapters 1 and 2 says tap target creature an opponent controls, and it doesn't untap for as long as you control Time of Ice. And Chapter 3 says return all tapped creatures to their owner's hands. So once you get to Chapter 2, if somebody swings out at you, their creatures are tapped, they're going to go back to their owner's hand. So that is what makes Chapter 3 kind of interesting. It's a good way to defend yourself against, an opponent who doesn't really want to spend a turn recasting all their creatures. So I think it's interesting. The card would go from situational to playable if, again, there was a reliable way to remove lore counters. Right now, there's so few cards that can, and they're usually one-shots. So if there's a reliable way to change that, then and only then would this be considered playable, in my opinion. But in some situations, this card can be really cool. See what I did there? Triumph of Geralt. Chapters 1 and 2 say you can put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control with the greatest power. So make your biggest thing a little bigger. Chapter 3 says target creature you control with the greatest power gains flying, first strike, and lifelink. So keyword soup your biggest creature. No, I'm not feeling that one. Really, the only place I might consider this is Tavasa, but there's so many better options already for Tavasa that I don't know. I don't see myself trying to slot this in anywhere. Tamarid calls the dead. Chapters 1 and 2 lets you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may exile a creature or enchantment to get a 2/2 zombie token. Generally, if I'm running this, I'd rather not exile anything from my graveyard. I don't think the 2/2 zombie is worth what we're exiling in most decks. Chapter 3 says you gain X life and scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. So Chapter 3, that life gain's kind of cool. Might be good in Muldrotha or any build that wants to put cards into the graveyard as long as you don't exile anything. Because it's basically 3 mana, mill your best 6 or mill your top 6 essentially. Very, very situational. Again, I don't think you're exiling for the zombie token unless you really need that zombie token. Our last one is Waking the Trolls. 6 mana to destroy target land. No good. Oh, wait a second. Chapter 2, put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Still, that's 6 mana to make a 2 mana swing between you and one opponent. Chapter 3, choose an opponent. If they control fewer lands than you, create a number of 4/4 troll warrior tokens with trample equal to the difference. No, not good enough. That's way too slow for that effect. 6 mana. I mean, yes, you're in Gruul and you can ramp to that pretty quickly. But unless you're playing a proliferate strategy of some sort, you are not getting to that 3rd chapter. No one's going to let you get to that 3rd chapter. And even if you do, you might... How many trolls are you creating? 2? 3? That's not... I think 12 power, but it's a 3-turn investment, I think is a little too steep a price. But that's my opinion, and this is my tier list for all of the sagas in Magic up to this point. So my window's a little too small. I do apologize for that. It ended up being a little bit too small. But we get to see where everything lines up. And yeah, this is what I think of the sagas and Commander thus far. Now, obviously, we will see more. It's a very popular mechanic with players and designers alike. It's not say C EDH quality stuff, but still, most casual tables would love to be able to run, especially the cards I have in my top tiers. So, yep, that's where I stand on all these sagas. What's your opinion? Is there something I put too low, too high? We got the comment section. Let's have some fun with this, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now.